Hello, I'm Rory Smith. This episode is brought to you by MindJournal, the world's #1 best-selling journal for men. And I was very selective when choosing a sponsor because I've always said I would genuinely prefer not to have one than to team up with a product that I don't believe in. I'm a huge fan of journaling, and one of the main reasons for choosing MindJournal is that it's developed with psychology professors and therapists and based on proven science, and that's why I believe it works for me. If you want to get into journaling, upgrade your experience, or give it as a gift to someone, then go to mindjournals.com and enter Rory Smith 10 at checkout for a 10% discount on selected products. I only have sponsors I truly believe in. MindJournal has helped me, and I really hope it helps you too. Hello. Thank you so much for choosing to listen to this episode of Be My Guest with me, Rory Smith. This is an episode that really hit me hard, and even listening to it back actually brought tears to my eyes in parts. Kristina Kuzmič is many things, but one of them is being a mum to Luca. Luca struggled with his mental health as a teenager, and Kristina has now written a very thought-provoking and very honest book about how she was unprepared to deal with that at the time. And she reflects now, in hindsight, on what Luca actually needed from her that she didn't know at the time. Those lessons she has now learnt, and she's put them into a book, along with her story, to help anyone who knows someone dealing with mental health struggles. So if your child, your spouse, parent, friend, or anyone you know is dealing with mental health challenges, then this book and this conversation will hopefully help you to understand a little bit more of what that person needs from you. And it may surprise you and be the exact opposite of what you think. The book is I Can Fix This and Other Lies I Told Myself While Parenting My Struggling Child. And this is its wonderful and beautiful author, Kristina. So Kristina, before we start our conversation today, how is Luca?
Oh, he's doing well. The way we always say it is he's doing well today because it's day by day.
How are you doing?
I'm good. I was on a big book tour and it was a lot because, this book is so heavy and so other families are opening up to me about the stuff that's going on in their home. And it was just it just felt very heavy emotionally. And then I spent a month in Croatia, where I'm from, just sort of focusing on my own mental health. And so that was really, really good for me.
Mm-hmm. And it's so important to do that, to set those boundaries, to be able to be in a place where you can say no and to prioritize yourself. And that's something you discuss in the book, which is I Can Fix This and Other Lies I Told Myself While Parenting My Struggling Child. Now, I would assume that your intention for this book is to help other parents to feel less alone. What's Luca's intention for this book?
The same, honestly. Mm-hmm. It's interesting. There's, even with mental health being discussed so much more now, it's still not discussed enough, and it's still not discussed as honestly as it should be because of all the judgment out there. When Luca was in Croatia with me, and we were on an evening walk, and I pulled out my phone and I started reading to him some of the messages and the emails I received from people who had read the book. And we both got really emotional. And he said to me, "Mom, it was all worth it. It was all worth it. Me being so honest and, being okay with you writing this and contributing to it." And then he wrote the last chapter. He said it was all worth it because every email, every message was from a family who was struggling, who now felt less alone.
Was it a tough process for both of you to go back to those places?
It was. In fact, I almost tried to get out of my book contract with my publisher. I signed it and I started writing, and I just was really having a hard time because I was, we were in a better place, and now I'm reliving all these really tough moments. And I would ask Luca occasionally, hey, should we share this? Are you okay with me sharing this? We can keep this out because, we share some really personal stuff that people might judge him or me for. Mm-hmm. And every time I said that, he said, write it. Just write it all. Mm-hmm. And so I ended up talking to my therapist one day, and I said, this isn't good for me. I need to get out of this contract. Why am I putting myself back there where I'm reliving all these painful and hard moments, and sort of going on and on. And my therapist said something so profound and beautiful. He said, Kristina, you're writing a love story. This is I'm choking up just saying this. It's a love story between a mother and her son. And that changed my whole perspective on writing this book. And I shared that with Luca, and I think it helped him as well. Just realizing that, all those bad days, even the worst ones, especially the worst ones, they were a love story.
And you say the word bad day, but I loved it in the book when you said that all of the bad days made you appreciate that the average days were actually good days.
Yeah, I think sometimes I think the way I wrote it is sometimes we have to. Oh, how did I write it? We have to go through hell days to appreciate that average days are actually amazing days. Yeah. Actually, do you know the story behind the cover of the book?
No, tell me.
So the cover of the book, for those that don't know, is the back of Luca and me. We're walking, and I have my hand on his back. So years ago, I had to call the police on my son, and he was in a psychiatric hospital for 10 days and then a residential program for 6 weeks. And the day after he was released from the residential program, we went to Croatia to spend time with my family. And as we were there, he was doing really badly. And I was so discouraged because he had all this help in the hospital and all these therapists and adjusting his medication. And now he's back to being suicidal. He's self-harming. He's isolating. It was just awful. So one day I suggested we take a walk, and we're taking a walk as a family, and Luca and I are kind of walking ahead of everybody. And my husband noticed that he's talking to me, which he a lot of times would push me away at that time. And he's opening up, and he even allowed me to show some affection. I put my hand on his back for a while. And so my husband snapped a picture of that because he wanted me to have that moment just to look back on. And back then, we never thought we would ever talk about this publicly or write a book. But that photo got me through so many of those bad days. And that photo, that moment walking with my son, I would have easily overlooked, right? It was just a walk. But capturing this, what other people would see as an average moment, being a really special moment at that time, just really gave me hope for more of those average days that I was hoping for. And so it's so poignant now that that picture is on a book that we are hoping will give other people that hope.
How important has hope been in all of this?
Oh gosh, hope is everything. And what's hard when you're supporting a child who's struggling is you get your hopes up a lot and then you get disappointed. And so it's very easy to lose hope because it's not like there's one turning point and things are better now. And I would sort of get excited because, we found a new doctor and this is going to make a difference. Or he's finally in a residential program where I can see he's really thriving and that'll make a difference. Or he's finally given up, self-medicating with drugs. And it's always just up and down and up and down and up and down. And so if I hadn't held on to hope, I can't even imagine what would have happened. But it's important to hold on to hope, not just for us and our own sanity, but for our children. Because if we lose hope, well, why do they need to hold on to any if they don't see us having any?
Let's talk about some of the tough parts of the book that you go into. And it kind of begins when he was a teenager, because you write that sometime between the ages of 12 and 13, I noticed Luca's disposition and behaviour start to change, and I quickly diagnose him with the common human condition known as teenager. There's humour in this book too, let me add. What have you come to understand to be the difference between they're just being a teenager and something more serious than that?
Yeah, so, at the time I write in the book how one of my first big mistakes was I came from a place of assumption instead of a place of curiosity. And so I assumed, I know what this is. He's being a teenager. I know, I recognize this behavior. But when I really started to stop assuming and decided to really just sit and pay attention and learn and be curious, I realized that he wasn't just isolating from mom and dad because we're not cool anymore now that he's a teenager. He was isolating from his friends. And he wasn't finding joy in any of the things he used to find joy in. He was isolating from his hobbies and sports and all of that. And so that was a big sign to me. And then also, I think a lot of times kids in general who are breaking rules or behaving in whatever way adults find it unacceptable, they're labeled as bad kids. And really, they're not. They're kids who are in pain. And they don't know how to deal with that pain. It's too complex. It's too hard. And so it comes out as behaviors that we just want to fix instead of really dealing with the root of the problem.
And that's so interesting, because you kind of made me realize in reading the book that it's not looking at the what they're doing, but the why they're doing it.
Yeah. I think as parents, we love these kids so much, right? You have a child and now your whole world has changed. You just love this kid so much. And you want to do your best to set them up for the best future. And then we see them doing behaviors that are, negative or sometimes even dangerous. And we jump into fixing it. We jump into just throwing a consequence on that behavior because we don't want them to destroy their future or grow up to be entitled or spoiled or whatever. And none of it helps unless we are dealing with the root of the problem. In fact, it will only get worse unless we're dealing with the why. What is underneath this behavior? One thing I learned, and I mentioned the book from Luca's therapist, is every behavior is a communication. It's a way of saying a want or a need. That's what the behaviors are doing. They're communicating to us a want or a need. It is our job as parents to figure out what is that need.
And it's sometimes easy to listen to a conversation like this and sort of hear the fluffy duffy stuff, but actually when you read your book and you read the hardship, the challenges that both you and Luca and as a family have been through, and it's when you hear those things that Luca was saying to you, such as I hate you, but what he was actually saying, which you talk about in the book, which is I need help. How do you deal with that in those moments? Because it's all well and good listening to podcasts like this, but it's very different when you're confronted with it.
Yeah, I mean, I was so hurt by everything he was saying to me and the way he was treating me, and it's hard not to take it personally. And I genuinely at one point believed that he really did hate me. What I realized was, and this is through, a lot of therapy that we did together, but also just through conversations I've had with Luca since, now that he's doing better, all those times that he was screaming that he hates me, he really hated himself. But it is much easier to take all that pain you have and throw it on someone else than allow yourself to feel what you really feel. And he even wrote because he wrote the last chapter of the book, he even wrote in there how I took all of my anger out on my mom because I knew she'd never leave me. I was the place where he felt safe, and he knew that she's going to love me through all of this. Now, that's a really messed up, screwed up compliment, I guess. But I had to learn throughout the process that this was his depression, his anxiety. That's what was screaming at me. And really, like you said, the words coming out of his mouth were, it may have sounded like I hate you and vulgarities and all this stuff, but really what he was screaming is, Mom, I want to die. Help me. Please help me. And he just, at the time, didn't know how to verbalize that in a more productive way.
But even when he was saying, help me, he still wasn't asking you to fix it.
Exactly. Exactly. And I think that's a theme throughout the book. which is why the title is I Can Fix This and Other Lies I Told Myself, is me trying to fix it and control it. You know, I was raised, I think a lot of us were raised with the, notion that a good parent sees a problem with their child and they fix it. That's what a good parent does. And some things are not fixable in that way. And every time I would jump to give him advice or jump to throw a consequence or jump to try to, quote unquote, fix something or control something, things got worse. Things got worse each time. Because what my child needed more than anything was for me to shut up and listen and really be there with him and sit with him in his pain instead of running around like a crazy person, just trying to fix it all.
This episode is brought to you by MindJournal, the world's #1 best-selling journal for men. And I was very selective when choosing a sponsor because I've always said I would genuinely prefer not to have one than to team up with a product that I don't believe in. I'm a huge fan of journaling, and one of the main reasons for choosing MindJournal is that it's developed with psychology professors and therapists and based on proven science, and that's why I believe it works for me. If you want to get into journaling, upgrade your experience, or give it as a gift to someone, then go to mindjournals.com and enter Rory Smith 10 at checkout for a 10% discount on selected products. I only have sponsors I truly believe in. MindJournal has helped me, and I really hope it helps you too. I thought it was interesting when reading the book when you were leaning on your own support systems. So you have a friend, Kat, and she said to you one time, which you write in the book, she said to you, "You don't have to talk if you don't feel like talking, Kristina. I'll just sit here with you." And then you write about one of your therapy sessions and you write, "Some visits I don't want to talk about Luca. Other visits I want to unload completely." So when adults are dealing with adults, they ask them what they want. What do you need from me? Do you want to cry? Do you want a distraction? Do you want to get drunk? Do you want to talk about it? What do you need from me? And in reading your book, that's what Luca was asking for from his mum. But it's a weird dynamic for a mum to do that to a child.
Yeah, because in the moment, I know better now. In the moment, it feels passive. It feels like I'm not putting in enough work. I'm not trying hard enough if I'm not doing something. Whether that's literally doing something or just giving advice. And I write later in the book how I learned to ask Luca, and I still do this every day. In fact, he's right now living 3 hours away working with his grandfather, and I still will call him or text him every day. And I say, how can I best support you today? Because to me, that's such a non-controlling, loving thing. And it's saying, I want you to trust yourself. I want you to trust that you know what you're feeling and you know what you need. And I want you to know that I am here if in any way I can support you through that. But it's always, again, going back to coming from a place of curiosity, not figuring out how I want to support him, but asking, how can I best support you today?
Do you still find that difficult?
It's gotten easier. I think it's like anything. It sort of, the more you see the positive, reactions to it, you get more motivated. And we became so much closer. Our relationship completely changed when I stopped trying to fix him and worked on fixing me. That's really when everything changed. And, now he calls me, or if he's home, he'll come in my bedroom and he wants to talk and open up. And, the only reason he's comfortable doing that is he knows I'm not going to jump to fix, or I'm not going to immediately freak out and be scared if he tells me he's having a bad day, that I can be that calm and be steady and listen and ask questions. Our kids are, not just kids. Think about adults in your life. We don't want to go to people if they give us some sort of a big dramatic reaction or preach at us. That's not who we usually go to when we're struggling. We just go to someone who will help us feel less alone and believe that we are genuinely feeling what we're feeling.
And you said something there. You said that things became easier for you when you started focusing on fixing yourself rather than fixing Luca. Now, the immediate reaction that some people might have because of the way that we're brought up and because of society is that sounds quite selfish. But actually, to you, it's the most selfless thing.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things I didn't really realize until this whole thing with Luca is how many unhealed parts of myself I was bringing into parenting. So many unhealed parts that caused me to, feel insecure about things and go straight into fear and anxiety and ego stuff and shame stuff. And there's just so many things. And I realized the only thing I actually have control over is me. The only thing in this whole situation, as painful and scary as it is, and knowing I could lose my child in any moment, the only thing I can control is me. And that is a hard thing to accept, but it is the healthiest thing to accept. And so controlling me as far as working on those healed parts of me, but also learning to be so good to myself. I couldn't control everything life threw my way, but I could control how I treated myself throughout it all.
Because you write in the book, and this really hit me. I have spent so many years telling mothers in every way I can reach them, do not ever feel guilty for taking care of the most important person in your child's life, which is whom?
You. The parent. Yeah.
That's going to be hard for some people to accept.
Yeah, but do you have time for me to tell the birthday story real fast about my 40th birthday?
Don't even do it real fast.
Okay. So this was a big lesson for me, and I hope for anybody listening that it will, be sort of a perspective changer. My 40th birthday was coming up. I love birthdays. I'm really big on birthdays, but I've never done anything for myself for my birthday. I was always just making a big deal of everybody else's birthdays. So my husband suggests, let's have a big 40th birthday party for you. And he gets a DJ and this beautiful restaurant, reserves it, and there's people flying in from out of town. It's going to be this beautiful party. And the party is supposed to take place on Friday night, my actual birthday. Tuesday before that Friday was the evening that I had to call the police on my child and have him taken to a psychiatric hospital. Wednesday before that Friday, he was in the emergency room waiting on a bed to open up, and he was screaming at me to get the hell out every time I came to visit him. And Thursday, the day before the party, he was finally in a psychiatric hospital. And so, of course, I was going to cancel the party. And my sweet mother-in-law says, there are no visiting hours during that time, during the evening at the psychiatric hospital, so you won't be able to visit Luca. So why don't you just go through with it? Because I think this is the exact time you should be surrounded by people who love you. So reluctantly, I agreed to go through with this party, and I dress up and I show up and I am faking the smiles and trying to not make it awkward for everybody else. And I am just dying inside. And all I can think about is Luca was supposed to be here with me. And I feel awful. And then all of a sudden, a friend of mine pulls me onto the dance floor and I start dancing. And I dance and I dance and I dance until there are blisters on my feet and sweat running down my back. I dance. And it felt really, really good. And right after it felt really, really good, it felt really, really bad. Because what kind of a mother has a party for herself, celebrates herself, dances while her son is in a psychiatric hospital against his will, wanting to die? And I felt like the worst human possible. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't sleep for so many nights after that. I just felt such guilt. So a few months later, I'm talking to one of my best friends, Zach, and I'm telling him I cannot shake this guilt. I cannot believe I had that stupid party when Luca was literally at his lowest. And my friend Zach says to me, Kristina, you did him a favor. I said, what? That doesn't make sense. He said, when I was in high school and I went through my severe depression, I was awful to my mom at times. I put her through a lot. And if I knew that on top of everything else I had put her through, that she canceled something she was really excited about and looking forward to because of me, I would still carry that guilt with me years later, decades later. By going through with that party, you gave Luca one less thing to feel that he destroyed. And I just remember I got chills all over my body and it felt like the guilt had lifted. And I remember years later, I think it was when we were writing the book, I brought it up to Luca and I said, Luca, did you even know that I had a party and blah, blah. And he said, yeah, I saw pictures and videos. And I said, did you see videos of me dancing? And he said, yeah, I did. And I said, just be completely blunt and honest with me. How do you feel about that? And at this point, he didn't know what Zach had told me. And Luca just sort of got emotional. He said, Mom, thank you. I carry so much guilt about the stuff I did when I was depressed and the way I treated people. This would have been another thing to feel awful about for the rest of my life. Thank you. He literally echoed what Zach said. And it made me realize, sometimes we humans, we think that if our loved one is suffering, we have to suffer as well, because that is the only way to show that we are loving and we're empathetic and we care about our child. How can we be happy if our child is suffering? But I learned that good feelings, positive emotions, cannot be a reward that I have to earn, especially when earning that reward is contingent on circumstances completely out of my control. So by taking care of yourselves, parents, you are not taking away from your child. You are not being unloving to your child. You are actually giving your child a happier, saner, healthier parent and support system. And also, you are giving your child one less thing to feel that they destroyed.
Wow. It's not often I'm lost for words during an interview. Wow.
That's a hard one though. It's a hard one.
No, I get it.
Yeah.
I get it because I'm thinking of it from Luca's side, because that's where I've been, that's where I am, yeah, I get it. And that's one less thing to worry about. Yeah,
and I've heard that, when I was on tour after my shows, we would do a meet and greet, and so I got to talk privately with families. And I remember a husband telling me that, he was struggling at some point, and he said, I'm so grateful for every time my wife did something fun during that time. When she had her girls' weekend, or she went to the spa, or, she decided, I'm not worrying about the house being clean or whatever. He was like, I look back on those moments and I'm so grateful, because it would have just destroyed me to know that I made her life even harder. It's hard enough when your loved one is struggling, but that I made it even harder by taking all those moments of joy away from her.
Yeah, that's so true, because then you feel the burden of the thoughts in your head could be, but I'm now holding them back. I'm now ruining their life. I'm taking their joy away from them. This is my fault. I'm blaming myself. I shouldn't have done this. I need to get better. Forcing yourself to get better. And the thoughts just go and go and go. Whereas if they're out there having a good time, you go, that's brilliant. They're going to be in a better place to support me. And also, I'm not holding them back from their joy.
Yeah. And even years later now, after Luca has been through so much therapy and we've been through therapy together and he's doing so much better, even now, occasionally something will get brought up and he'll say, oh, Mom, I am so sorry. I'm so sorry for everything I put you through, and you lived in such fear. And, and finally one day I said, because I kept telling him, Luca, you don't have to apologize. I've forgiven you for all of it. Like, there is no, I don't even think about any of that. And finally, one day as he was saying that, and he was actually crying and apologizing, and my husband said, Luca, your mother has forgiven you, but you haven't forgiven yourself. And it was just a moment of silence, and it really hit Luca, and we realized, he still has a lot of healing to do in that area. And so Zach is right? Zach was right. It just, all it does when we decide that, we're just going to be selfless and we're just going to pour all of our energy and all of our joy and all of our everything into a family member who's struggling, all that does is add more guilt when they're looking back someday. And it's not worth it. And by the way, there's a way to be the loving, empathetic, supportive support system while also taking good care of yourself.
To be in a better place to support them.
Yeah, because when I really start taking care of myself better, well, that makes you more confident, right? And that makes you feel like healthier. And that's what Luca needed. He didn't need somebody who was completely destroyed. I can't support him if I have nothing left. I can only support him if I have found places to get healthier and places to find joy in life.
With being a parent, you write about that and you say, I used to think that being a good parent meant I had to be a leader and my kids would follow. I needed to hold their hand and pull them in the direction that I wanted to go. What do you now see good parenting as?
Walking alongside with them and being a student. I think that, a lot of us were raised with parents who were the authority figures, and they knew, and they were leaders, and we were sort of taught that is what it is. That's what it means to be a good parent. But the only expert at being Luca is Luca.
Mm-hmm.
So anything I assume or any path I want from any of that, that's not going to be helpful. I need to, as I wrote in the book, stand in awe of his story and approach him as a student wanting to learn. And then, with that knowledge, then help guide him, help support him. But I can't pull in any direction that I think his life should go in. That's unfair, and ultimately, it is so unhealthy for them. They have their own path, and we have to respect it. And our job is just to help guide them and help them, be the healthiest, best version of who they already are, putting aside all of our preconceived ideas or all the pressures the world may put on them.
And stop trying to change them as well is something that I've noticed in the book. And when you began to realize that, you began to accept Luca's condition, his mental health, your journey through it as a family, as a mum. What impact did that acceptance have on your life?
I mean, I think a lot of it came from, I did a lot of my own searching and my own thinking about my own mental health and my own childhood throughout all this, and realizing how negative it was for me every time the world pulled me in a certain direction. It's like that quote I saw online, who were you before the world told you who you should be, right? And we all have some of that in us, right? We've all been influenced. But I remember having this moment of clarity one day. I was in a parking lot. I write about this in the book. I was in a parking lot packing groceries into my car, and I hear this woman screaming my name, Kristina, Kristina. And I turn around and I recognize her, and our boys had gone to elementary school together. But now I hadn't seen her in years. And so we're just catching up and talking about the boys and all that. And finally she goes, can you believe our boys are graduating this year? I mean, where did the time go? And we're trying to figure out for Austin whether to throw him a big party or whether to just have a little family thing. What are you going to do for Luca? And everything inside of me wanted to make up some vague answer like, oh, I don't know. And instead, I just decided to meet that moment with truth and ease. And I said, Luca is not graduating. And she immediately got flustered and looked embarrassed. And oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. And I just gently grabbed her hands and I said, no, it's okay. Luca has had some mental health struggles and he's focusing on those, and I'm really proud of him. And I hope he's proud of himself too. And I remember so clearly that moment because I just had this clarity that I'm actually very much okay with our story. I'm very much okay with Luca's journey being what it is instead of what I wanted it to be or what the timeline the world set for him. I'm very much okay. And I'm very accepting finally of the reality and what it really is without pretending. It just felt so empowering. And then 5 months later, after his class graduated, all his friends graduated, 5 months later, he completed his high school work and they sent a diploma in the mail. And I thought, no, he deserves a ceremony. And so we set up chairs in our house to look like an audience. And I went on Amazon and I ordered a cap and a gown. And later he told me with tears in his eyes, I never thought I would get to wear a cap and gown. And I made a program and this whole thing. And it was so beautiful because I wanted Luca to not just not be embarrassed for the rest of his life. Oh my gosh, I can't believe I graduated late. I didn't graduate my class. Not just that. I wanted him to actually celebrate this moment. I wanted him to celebrate his timing. Because in my opinion, Luca did not graduate 5 months late. Luca graduated perfectly on time, on his time. And that's that part of not trying to change them, not trying to push them, not trying to put them in a box, but just standing in awe of their story.
In truth and in ease.
Yeah.
And how easier, how clearer do things become when you lean into that power of vulnerability and power of a messy life and the power of imperfection?
I mean, it is a completely... It's like, I wish I could visually show it as a makeover, you know, when they have the before and after pictures, but I don't know how. But that's what it feels like. It's such a transformation, because the thing that holds us down, the thing that makes life so much heavier and more complicated and painful, two things. One, worrying about other people's judgments, and two, our own self-criticism. If we can lower those, life changes. I wrote in the book how I started saying no thank you. Every time I started worrying about, oh my gosh, what do those neighbors think? The police is putting my son in the back of the car handcuffed, and, you know, or what will that mom think that my son's not graduating time, or, you know, whatever. Somebody found out that my son was in a psychiatric hospital. I would say to myself, no thank you. No thank you. I'm not picking that up. I'm not picking up that judgment, that criticism. And I started saying the same thing, by the way, to myself when I started doing that in my head of like, what did I do wrong? And was I too strict? And was I too lenient? And why don't I know the answers to that? Why can't I help him? No, thank you. Because what that does is take up so much energy and distract us from what we actually need to focus on. That becomes the loudest voice in the whole story. And that's not fair to Luca, and that's not fair to me. That should not be a noise. That should not be something that's taking up energy in my life. And so even to this day, whenever I get too critical of myself, or I, you know, think somebody else is judging me, or they really are judging me, I just out loud just whisper, no, thank you. And I just picture myself not picking that up. And that has been life-changing for me.
Do you do that when you... Because I imagine it creeps in at times that you pressure yourself into being a good mum. Through your experience, have you learned to be a mum rather than a good mum?
Yes. And you know what else I realized? That now that I'm able to be accepting of the flaws and accepting that I'm not supposed to know everything and I will make mistakes, I think it actually makes me a better mom than when I was trying so hard to be a good mom, right? And what I realized is I was chasing somebody else's definition of good, right? The world sets this picture of what a good parent is. To me, a good parent is somebody who messes up because we're modeling to our children that it's okay not to be perfect. To me, a good parent apologizes when they're wrong. To me, a good parent has off days. You know, it's just a completely different definition of good. I'm not chasing this you know, picture that was set for me, or that social media a lot of times still posts, right? This picture of what a good parent is. To me, a good parent is a real parent. A parent who is accepting of all the messy, crazy, and wanting to learn. That's a good parent.
And accepting of, because you've used this word many times during our conversation, is accepting of the mistakes that you've made and what you can learn from them and how you can better yourself for next time from them.
Yeah. I had this realization a couple of years ago where I thought, you know, I was kind of beating myself up and I thought, wait, if I actually had all the right answers and I always knew how to fix things for my kids and the perfect parenting solution, that would be weird. Like, that would actually not be normal. That would be, you know, like, so just even accepting that and going, oh, messing up, being clueless, being lost, making mistakes. Oh, that's actually healthy and good. The opposite of that is weird.
I agree. The last chapter in the book, as you said, is written by Luca. And in it, which is a very, very emotional, a very deep letter and chapter that he writes. And he says the words, "I'm glad I'm still here." What do those words mean to you?
Even you just saying that right now brought tears to my eyes. I'm just really, really proud of him because it's hard. It's so hard. And, you know, we sort of rode this wave together and had to learn from each other. And I'm just so proud of him for continuing to show up for himself. Just show up. And some days, by the way, showing up means just staying alive. That's it. Just staying alive. Even if you're in bed all day, just staying alive. But, and I'm so glad that he's glad that he's still here, you know? So it's very emotional. And, you know, I always want to be realistic with people. And I think the book says it. It's not like, this isn't a story like there's, you know, a movie with the perfect happy ending. In his chapter, he describes mental health as a tug of war. You know, sometimes you're winning and sometimes you're losing. And that's very realistic, which is why at the beginning of this conversation, I said, Luca is doing well today. Mm-hmm. So, you know, every day that he is happy he's still here is a really, really good day.
You're proud of him. Are you proud of you?
I finally am. If you asked me a few years ago, I would be very uncomfortable. But I am. I'm really proud of myself. And again, not proud because, well, I know it all and I figured it out and I'm so great. No, I'm proud of the fact that I'm willing to be honest with myself. And I'm proud of the fact that, you know, I'm finally okay with not being perfect. And I'm proud of the fact that when I mess up, you know, I don't immediately get defensive like I used to. And I just accept that, yes. And, you know, so I'm proud of myself for just living in a real, authentic, messy life and no longer seeing it as a weak life.
It's real.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Kristina, thank you to you and thank you to Luca for this book, because in writing it, in my eyes, you're a superhero. And I know that you're a superhero in some people's lives, because in the book you write, Ari, who's one of your children, is already in bed, but not yet asleep. I walk into his room and snuggle up next to him. He lets out a big yawn, then asks, "Mummy, if you could have any superpower in the whole wide world, what would it be?" I think for a minute, then reply, "To heal." Well, Kristina, I have no doubt that this book is playing a part in the healing process of some people's lives today. So thank you for that.
And now I'm crying. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for trusting me with your story, and thank you to Luca for that too.
Thank you. I will pass that on to him.
Thank you. This episode is brought to you by MindJournal, the world's #1 best-selling journal for men. And I was very selective when choosing a sponsor, because I've always said I would genuinely prefer not to have one than to team up with a product that I don't believe in. I'm a huge fan of journaling, and one of the main reasons for choosing MindJournal is that it's developed with psychology professors and therapists and based on proven science, and that's why I believe it works for me. If you want to get into journaling, upgrade your experience, or give it as a gift to someone, then go to mindjournals.com and enter Rory Smith 10 at checkout for a 10% discount on selected products. I only have sponsors I truly believe in. MindJournal has helped me, and I really hope it helps you too.